You can think
Like
of
5 minutes before we started this podcast, you were a really shitty leader. Do you remember?
Is the thought of being imperfect keeping you from taking action? Welcome to Inspired Action for Imperfect Humans. Each week, we give you real-life stories and thought-provoking research that inspires your soul to live a more fulfilled life through your own actions. From the heart of Calgary, Canada, here are your hosts, award-winning coaches Christopher Lawrence and Kyle Kalu.
Well, hello. Hello. For those who are watching, you might have seen a little bit of a reaction on my face, only because Zoom did some upgrade, and so they had this Siri-like, I kind of think it's Siri's cousin, who's letting you know, giving you audio, just telling you this meeting is being recorded. So I was a little bit taken by, I'm like, who's that? I thought someone else was in this meeting. I was looking
It's
around
kind
going,
of
who has
obnoxious
joined?
though. It's like some
It's robotic.
crappy, Telus or Rogers automated voice. This meeting is being recorded.
Let's not blame those guys. For those who are listening, those are our telecom, two of our biggest telecom companies in Canada, because people are like, what? Think of Verizon or whoever you guys using elsewhere. Listen, let's get it right into it, because I want to talk a little bit today about some research that I've asked you, Christopher, to look into around shitty managers. Like, what
I was
is
hoping you'd
happening?
ask me about my jacket first.
I was going to get to that, actually. Can you wait for it? Because I was wondering why you have your jacket on still, but I'm just trying to let these people
My
know what they're
outdoor
doing here.
jacket.
Yeah. Well, just
Yeah,
your
because
jacket.
girl,
What?
oh girl,
Why do
because
you have a
working with
jacket?
you, I have to run out of here at any minute, girl. I just need to keep one bag packed at the door at all times just because I don't know what you're
so,
gonna do or what you're gonna say.
you're always
Let me
ready?
tell you
Is that what
something.
you're saying?
What we're talking about today. Listen, I'm gonna name this podcast. It's called "Shitty Managers: The Research," and if you want to see it full force, just come work with Kyle, um, girl. And when we get
Okay.
into these statistics, how come every time we have to have a conversation about something, you are so vague? He's like, well, this is what I want. And I'm like, he's like, oh, I want to have like a questionnaire. He's like, for what? Well, I just want a questionnaire. Well, for what? Like, what do you want the respondents to do or say?
I
He's like,
think you
well,
need to
I just want to
stop.
show preparedness. Preparedness for what? I'm like,
I
red t-shirts. He's
think
like, it could be. I'm like, this is not useful.
I think you need to stop poking me before these podcasts. That's number one. Because every time there's a podcast about to go live, he finds a way to poke me, right?
That
If
is
you poke
not
the
true.
bear, you're going to get bitten.
Oh,
And
girl,
again,
and watch the bear run into the lion's mouth.
I may not be as clear, right? And I think when you're coming in armed with your jacket and boxing gloves ready to fight, right? Skin tight, ready to fight, then that's what happens. It's usually there's a fight. So again, can you just tell us why you still have the jacket on? Is it because you're getting ready to run out, or is there another reason? Because it does look good, I'll be honest with you.
Oh,
But
thanks. No, actually, it's just cozy. I'm just enjoying the coziness of it.
well, you should
I
enjoy
need
that cozy.
comfort having working in this office.
Interesting you talk about comfort, because I think at the end of the day, that is sometimes what happens to leaders, right? They like to stay in their comfort zone. And today I want to share a story about when I first became a manager. I was 16 years old. And if you can imagine, right, as a 16-year-old manager, there's something that's sometimes wrong about that. But what that really means is that I had no clue about managing people. Back then, because I was told I was really good at what I was doing, then they felt I could be promoted. So I got promoted. No training, no mentoring, no direction. I was good. I was really good at what I did. So they figured I'm going to be a good manager. How do you feel about that? Does that make sense?
Does what makes sense?
That I
See,
get
there's that
promoted at
vague thing he's
16?
doing. No, of course it doesn't make sense. I mean, here's the thing though, like people do get promoted because they deliver results. They do. And I think
In
that
their role? Yeah.
you are a results deliverer, and I also think you know how to walk the walk and talk the talk. Like you do, because there is a game to be played to move in management. And I think you do that well and you produce results.
Not having proper training, though, and I appreciate that because, yes, a lot of people, when they get promoted, is because they were very good at the role that they were in. However, we make the assumption that because they're so good at their role that they can train and teach and mentor and guide other people.
And lead others. Yeah.
And lead. And sometimes that's not the case. And so,
And
because
here
I
we
didn't
are,
have
65 years later, and we're still dealing with it.
oh man, I should talk to your team and find out what they think about you.
The funny thing is my team loves me. The problem is that I'm too kind.
However, what we find...
you need 4 weeks off? Yeah, no problem. I'll just do your job for you.
What we find is when people are not without guidance of creating that coaching culture, we have shitty managers. And I know you'll be really surprised to hear this for other people. I know Christopher isn't because he keeps calling me this. I was a shitty manager in the beginning. I was a really shitty manager in the beginning, only because I wanted everyone to move at my pace. I wanted everyone to do what I did. And like Christopher just said, deliver results. Why is everyone out? Why are other people having such a hard time with that? Why do they find an issue with it? Why can't they just do what I did and produce the results? However, that's not always the case. And when I was acting in that way, in that capacity, I was a shitty manager. And here's the thing, a lot of them won't tell you, right? A lot of your frontline people won't tell you. You'll have some outliers like Christopher Lawrence who will have no problems telling you, but not everyone is doing that, right? What's at risk when you're a shitty manager? What do you think, Christopher?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I think we actually have some stats on this. They are from the US again, which is, that's not a bad thing. I think that they would broadly apply in North America and maybe many first worlds nations. I'm not sure though. I can't speak to that. So this does come from the Labor Department Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey from 2018. Okay, so in America, 3 million Americans quit their job each month.
Wow. Yeah.
And of the 3 million that quit, 1.5 million of them quit their job. So half quit their job because of their manager. And greater than half think that managers are promoted prematurely.
That's what they're saying.
And 60% think that their managers need managerial training. To be honest, I think 60% is low. Yeah. I think it's probably closer to 70 or 80%. Yeah. And I'm just going to put a little plug in here. We focus so much on the leader, but we don't focus on what is the leadership training or, this concept followership. What is the followership training for the employees? Like, how can employees better support their leaders and better hold them accountable? Right? Like, how can they do that? And I think that, like, if you're not in leadership and you're not attuned to leadership, there's things that you miss. I spent a lot of my career doing that, where it's like, well, why don't they just do this? I was thinking about this morning. I was thinking about how, like, why, when I worked at WestJet, it's like, well, why don't they just do this? Like, why aren't they doing this? And it's like, look, with the way my brain thinks, I could find an innovative way of solving any problem.
Right.
But the leadership is so saturated. Like, leadership is so task saturated in most cases, not all cases, that they don't have time to think about innovative solutions. They're so busy doing the job rather than delegating the job, which is part of the problem. And it's like, so then we're not actually checking in with, like, okay, what do you see as the key problem and how can we fix it? And then of course there's the people interaction phase of it. But now being in leadership, I understand that there are different considerations, that it's like, well, you can't just do that. You can't just give people more money. You can't just, promote people. You can't just, but I think there's an overfocus on weird societal things. Like, we give currency to titles.
Right.
Somebody's job title has high currency. And it's like, why? Like, we've hired people who left massive organizations as directors that it's just like, you're functioning as a coordinator. We've hired people who are functioning as, or who've done the job as a coordinator. And it's like, it's like, do you want Kyle's job because you're competent? Like, Like I think that there's a huge mismatch here in terms of how we do this, but it's all societally driven, right? It's all
Right.
society, and there's no accountability. Sorry, when training is given, like training is given. I look at my spouse's organization. He works for a railroad. They provide phenomenal leadership training. My spouse uses it on me. He's not even in leadership, but he had the opportunity. Well, he's in leadership for his extracurriculars at work. He volunteers within the organization for a bunch of their charities and stuff. So he does a lot of leadership there. He uses their leadership skills in our relationship in terms of communicating and this and that. They work really well. It's super effective, but nobody holds the leadership accountable in his organization for that training. There's no checks and balances. Sorry, girl, you got me on a soapbox now.
Clearly. I'm just like, you're making my points for me, which is, and so the question is, why do leaders struggle, right? Let me just touch on two things you said, which I think was
accountability
great.
Is a huge part of it.
For sure. In the beginning, when you take a look at the first side of this is the front line. The front line feel exactly the same way. Based on my experience, based on working with people, and you work with a lot of these frontline folks as well, is they want that. They want accountability for these leaders. They want them to be trained. Like you saw some of the statistics that you just mentioned. They want to be trained. They should be trained, right? They're saying they're not trained because they're asking a similar question that you did. If they only did this, why are they not doing this? Why is it so complicated? Why? Because it seems as simple. Now, there's other things that goes into that, and I'll talk about that in a second. So the frontline, we know, wants training for these leaders. Managers, leaders, we're using that term for this podcast interchangeably. But again, it means different things sometimes for different people. But just think of managers, leader, it doesn't matter. Frontline wants you to be trained. They want, because they were saying you're not trained. They wish you were trained. Then you skip over to the senior leaders who are saying, similar to what you just mentioned, Christopher, is what we have all this training. We go through training programs for them. We give them these things. We have those things, and we've worked with that group, and we know they have phenomenal training. And so why are these managers / leaders not doing the things they're being trained? Again, they too want that accountability, right? And so it comes back to that fundamental question is, why do leaders / managers struggle? Leaders often excel at the individual contributor level, right? So think about that. Therefore, they get promoted in management position, leadership position, in short, because they're like what you said, Christopher, they're doers of the necessary task, right? Like I was when I was 16. However, once they get promoted, we find typically they receive little guidance or accountability to the training for their new role. And all the time, their functionality is different than what they used to do, which is what causes the issue. I'm going to break this down a little bit deeper because I know listeners and people who are watching are wondering, okay, like get me to the nuts and bolts of this. Think of it from this way. As a result of managers' lack of guidance and training, they will focus too much on the wrong task, which is in their comfort zone. That's what they're doing. Remember, we just moved them from being a doer to this new role with different functions, but yet without guidance and accountability in that direction and mentorship, creating what we like to call a coaching culture, they're going to go back to what they know, which is being a doer. And because it's within their comfort zone, we need to get them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah,
How do you
Kyle,
feel about that?
No, I totally agree. I think it's about getting out of their comfort zone. As you're talking, I just keep remembering stories of sometimes I had like a leader who was a really good delegator.
Right.
And that's good. Leaders need to be delegators. And I think that there needs to be more openness and encouragement from the leaders to allowing their staff to share and collaborate on those tasks too. It's like when somebody, like there should be encouragement. It's like, go talk to these 3 people and see what they say about it. Inform them, get you really create a well-rounded outcome. I think there needs to be more encouragement from leaders to teach their staff how to work with them. Like I'm really clear with my staff. Like, no, I don't like the word staff. We call them team members. I'm really clear with them about things like I'm going to change my mind a lot. Like that's my personality. And sometimes it's going to come after you've put work in. And so first thing, I need you to know that. Second thing, I want you to get really good at asking better questions to minimize your rework. Here's 5 questions that you can ask me with every project we're working on, or here's a few things that you can ask me that you can build from to see if we're clear on it. And you'll see me, because I've got to think out loud. I don't, I think in my head, but I'm a verbal processor, right? I gotta hear myself say something out loud to say, no, that's stupid, or no, that doesn't make sense, or and then I walk away and think about it for 3 minutes, and I'm like, well, if we did it this way, or whatever. So I think leaders need to do a better job of having their people help work with them, and leaders need to do a better job of asking the question, how do you need me to acknowledge you? Right? Like, how do you need me to, there's such an over focus on fucking minuscule bullshit, like how much vacation time somebody gets, how much title somebody gets, how much.
And if I do it for you, I had to do it for other people. Well, then do it for other people.
But then do it like what's the consequence? I think the bigger you are, the harder it is. Like if you're in an organization that has a massive front line, you can't be throwing around 15 different titles. It's confusing to the consumer, right? Like, it's confusing to your customers. But inside the walls of the organization, it's just, it's like, yes, you have to have standardization, right? But where is their flexibility? Like, where does somebody get to have the say, so that they don't become complacent because they're not just I look at like retail as an example of this, and it's just like, I wish that retail workers had more flexibility to actually service the customer. Like, I think, I think there's a huge lack of product knowledge in a lot of the places, which is huge missed opportunity. I cannot tell you how many places I've walked into for seasonal items, because it's, spring and I'm planting and stuff like this. And it's like, oh, do you have landscaping fabric? No, we don't. And I'm like, I know you have landscaping fabric. And they didn't even know what it was. How could you not? Yeah, it's like they didn't even know what it was. And it's like, if they knew and they said, we're out, that's totally different, right? Yeah. But they didn't even know what it was. And I'm thinking, I know you're a seasonal worker, but like, you guys are losing sales left, right, and center. And he's like, no, I don't think it's this. And he had to ask 7 people, Kyle. And then, do you know where it was? It was right past the place that he had walked 7 times to go talk to 7 people. And then I kind of poked my head around the corner, and I was looking, right? I poked my head around the corner, and it was actually in an end display. It's just, it was very poorly merchandised with a whole bunch of like tiki torches and stuff. So it was hard to see, so it was like, but where's that innovation? Like, who's focusing on this? Sorry, you get me on my soapbox.
That's okay. Girl. So I want you guys, I want to give you guys some tips here. I want to give you some tips around what can you do to move from being a shitty leader to get into a leader that's going to be more strategic, that's people going to be ensuring that their team is engaged, right? How are you going to showcase? I'm glad you said it
that way, because I think people need to recognize they were shitty leaders. I was a shitty leader. When I first took leadership roles on, I was very like micromanagey. I want it done this way because I'm A-type. And I didn't listen well enough. I didn't know how to hold people accountable. You've been a shitty leader, in your early years. And I think even as leaders, I would call us experienced leaders, we still have shitty leader moments.
Of course, it will happen to all of us, right? And I think if you
like that, like 5 minutes before we started this podcast, you were a really shitty leader. Do you remember?
In other news, so here are the 3 things that you need to be able to do, because I promise you, if you start at this is going to give you the most impact to making change, influencing, involving your leadership, right? Moving from a shitty leader to a strategic leader, right? So the first area I would say is focus on the manager-employee relationship, which what Christopher just clearly outlined. In today's agile environment and in virtual offices that we've been experiencing, employee relationships are really critical component to this culture of the organization. So effectiveness of this group is really going to depend on how do you build your relationship with your employee. I'm not saying go out for bowling night. I'm not saying, because that's a whole nother story. I'm saying finding ways where your communication can be very effective. Employees want better relationship with their leader. So this is where you need to be able to figure out with them, how can you be effective in your relationship? The second area I would say is managers' effectiveness in helping the employee to be effective, right? So again, how are you going to truly remove roadblocks from these employees? Identify the roadblocks for the employees so that way you can do what it takes to get them to be effective, because that's what you want anyway. And trust me, the employee wants that too. They want to be effective, but the leader needs to help them remove those roadblocks. And the third part is inspire performance and build a team that goes the extra mile. This specifically area is talking about the environment. As a leader, what environment are you creating? And is it conducive for them to be high performer in that role? So if you think of those three areas, right, how you can do better with your manager-employee relationship, how you can make sure you remove roadblocks for them so they could be more effective, and third, how are you inspiring that performance of your team member, creating that environment that allows for them to be great? Those are the three things I would say. Christopher, did you have something you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think there's a responsibility here for the team member too. Like there's some, it's like if you have a shitty leader or manager, also remember that they're just a human being trying to do their job, get their paycheck, and get through this thing we called life. Yeah. They are having a human experience. They come with their own set of histories and traumas and, successes and failures. And I think as an employee, as a team member, we need to do better at asking questions, like ask your leader,
absolutely,
how do you like to receive feedback? If I see something that I don't agree with, how do you want me to address it? Like how would you like to be approached? Right? If I see an innovation, do you want to hear about it? By the way, folks, these are also the questions that if you use them in your interviews, you are going to, one, stand out massively to the recruiting team. And two, you're going to have opportunities to learn whether or not it's actually the best role for you. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it goes back to that number one is, right, in that manager relationship, those are some of the questions, those are some of the interactions that you're going to have.
So folks, what is your imperfect inspired action this week? If you were to look at your career or your job, whatever you want to call it, you're to look at your career and your job, what is your inspired action this week in terms of working with yourself, your team, or your leadership?
It's our goal to build a global community of inspired action takers. And we can only do that with your help. So if you love inspired action, please leave a review on your favorite podcasting app and share us on your socials. You've heard from us. Now we want to hear from you. Go to inspiredactionpodcast.ca and tell us, what is the inspired action you took this week? Next week on Inspired Action for Imperfect Humans.
That's probably the worst thing you could do, is to treat everyone the same who should be treated differently.